So for those of you who do hard surface modelling, I, like many of you, probably follow Josh and Ponty Ryu. I'm sorry if I've got that wrong, Ponty. And all of their various tutorials, which are excellent for sort of hard surface. And Josh put this one up about a week ago, and I followed through it, as I tend to do with most of their tutorials. And then I was thinking on it and thinking about various other ways you could do it. And so I thought what I'd do is I'd actually do a video on two slightly alternate ways you could tackle this same shape. I'll sort of go through first the first one I did, which is just basing it straight off a circle and just working from there, and the other was just off a cylinder, which is very similar but only slightly different. But it's just showing you how the same result with Blender, you can normally come about it multiple ways, and you get the same result. So with that said, the first thing I'll do is I will add in as a reference the image that is based on that, and I'll just sort of position it so that it's more or less in the center. I'm ignoring the actual pivot of the image empty. I'm just using the captured pivot of the object itself, because that means I'm going to get a nice cylinder. I will be using hard ops again, because why not? But I will sort of mention how you'd go about doing it natively as well. So first things first, add a circle, make it 64, and I'll align it to the view just so it's visible straight away, and then just scale that, get it roughly to the size you want. Obviously when you're doing this on the fly, you're not going to be working to a reference unless you've drawn one yourself. Now the first thing I'm going to do then, as I always do, is apply rotation and scale. Otherwise that'll come back to bite you when you start adding things like solidify and various other modifiers like bevel, because they will sort of react to the scale. So if you suddenly apply the scale, they'll go out. So into edit mode, point mode with 1, B, and I'm going to select everything this side and just delete the vertices. Then I'm going to come in here, C for circle select, and I'm just going to whiz around these, and I'm going to delete those vertices. Select that point, E to extrude, bring it down to about there, E to extrude, bring it out to about there. Just again, this, how exact you want to be with this is up to you. So I'm keeping that point selected, shift click that, press F to create an edge. Then I always make sure I'm in tweak mode. If you're not, if you're in that, just press W till you get your tweak, and then you can sort of line up roughly where you'd expect these to be, more or less, assuming they're not beveled like this, say. So now set your pivot point to 3D cursor, A, Shift D and return, Control M for mirror, X, return, Control M, Z, return, A to select everything, M, B for by distance. That gets rid of your two vertices. And press F and you've got a face. That's your modelling done. So shade smooth, go in here, normals, or if you've got hard up, just sharpen. I'll make that 30. There we go. Right, and now apply a solidify modifier I set it to 0, so it's coming from the center, even thickness, and just something like that. That'll do. Right. Shift Z to go into wireframe. Shift A. Add a cylinder. 64. View. Scale. Take it down to about where you want it. Top view. Scale Y. Get it just zooming in with the numpad period. Scale Y again. About there, and then as usual rotation and scale, because I'm going to be beveling those outside edges, so I want to make sure they're alright. So select that, and either control minus if you're using bool tool, or difference, it doesn't really make any choice. Right, select that, go in, select the two big faces, Alt N, flip, then Control B, make sure you've only got one face, and there's your chamfer, like that. Now we can hide this now because we've got the circle we want. Right, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to work within the cutter rather than the main object this time, so do a Control B, like that. Alt E for extrude along normals, pull it in. I always like to use offset even, not that critical in this case, but in some instances that offset even is important. And go select, loops, boundary loop, Control B again, and apply your inner. Then you can hide that, and there's the object in terms of all the cutting. And if you want it a bit thicker, then what you can do is select them both, scale on the Y, just Control A, apply scale. And I see that's what I mean about scaling. Because that solidify is still active, you need to actually increase your solidify slightly rather than scaling it on the Y. So like I said, that's where your scale gotcha comes in. So anyhow, that's a bit better. Or at least I like that size better. And then I can just sharpen it and add a bevel. Like that. And I'm going to go down to the bevel, and I'm going to go to shading, and I'm going to harden normals. Go in. Now don't forget, if we turn all this off, if you put visibility, it's still only a face. So when I'm working with these, I don't use Control B, I use Control Shift B. And we just roll them off. We put visibility back on, and there you are. So you do the same with these. Select these, Control Shift B, select those two, Control Shift B. Now if you wanted to, what you could do, if I just back this up, I could select these two, and in hard ops I can use Q and Control Mark to apply a bevel to them. And that's not working very well. Now that might just simply be a question of moving that up to before the solidifier. That's not working. That's interesting. Okay, what I'm going to do then is do it the sort of manual way. Got those two selected. I'm going to go in, assign those to a group. I'm going to change that to group. vertices, that was the problem. Alright, let's back up to that. Change that to vertices. And even again, I'm going to move that up to before the solidify. There we go. That's better. That's what we want about. We'll put 8 in there. In fact, I'm going to put 12 in there. Why not? Knock myself out. So now I can play with that. And I can adjust that manually. Or like I say, you can just select them, do Control Shift B, and just do it by hand. So the choice is yours, really. You can select them, and you Control Shift B, roll it off, and we'll make that a chamfer. Just for the fun of it. So that's one method. About the only thing I used there was sharpen, which you can do manually by, if we just select a cube, something else I also use, I'll use inset with the control key rather than using extrude. The reason for that is if I do that inset with the control key, I can then manually scale those like that if I want to. So there's that. So anyhow, just as an aside, so I want to basically perform the equivalent of a hard up sharpen on this. Make sure nothing's selected, go select sharp edges, then do Control A, mark sharp, and then you can go into the numeric panel, item, up the crease, up the bevel weight, and you've effectively done the sharpen. So that's something to bear in mind. But if you've got hard ups, you're always going to use hard ups because reasons, as Ponte would have it. Which, yeah, basically you'd be daft not to. Right, so anyway, that's version 1. So we move that. You see again, what I'm going to do here actually is I need to select both of those to move them. That's what happens when you don't apply the boolean, because whenever you move that item, the boolean disappears. So anyway, let's hide that, put that back on. The other way, it's very, very similar. It will be adding a cylinder, view, scale it down. Oi, scale, thank you. Go into edit mode, wireframe, and just delete these faces, these big faces. Actually, don't even need to do that. Because the act of deleting the vertices you don't want would work. So just select those and delete the vertices. And you can see now it's got rid of the faces as well. So now you could, if you wanted to, delete some of these vertices and make it one face and extrude it. But again, for this particular shape, I would say that you're better off just deleting those relative vertices and just extruding, in this case, what would be the edge. So you're basically going to do the same. Select that edge, extrude it, yada, extrude. This time just keep that edge selected, shift click, and have to create the bottom face. And again, select everything, make sure you're in cursor as your pivot point. Shift D, Control MX, Control MZ, select everything, merge B, hide the empty, 2, select those, press F, and then you've got two options. You can either just do the same on the other side, or you can select everything, go up to Mesh and Symmetrize. And when you watch, symmetrize the minus Y to the Y, sorry, the minus X to the X. No, come on brain. Ah, have I not got rotation applied? Hang on. Okay, let's apply rotation. Right, okay, no. Let's undo that. Yeah, so the rotation isn't surprised. So let's apply the rotation. Now when I go in it, now do the symmetry, symmetrize, and you want minus Y to Y. There we go. Now we can hide that empty. And you can see that that's gone across like that. And you can just scale it slightly on the Y, a bit nicer. And then out of edit mode. And then after that, it's the same as before. It's wireframe, add a mesh, add a cylinder, view, scale, scale Y, rotation scale. Not that that was actually necessary, because this time we're just gonna apply that, and we're going to apply all. Just scale this on the Y a bit more. Sharpen it. So why not use hard ops if you've got it? It's like having a car and walking everywhere. Right, now one thing I would do here is, personally speaking, and this is entirely up to you. Well, for one, I don't like these. I'm going to get rid of these two. So I'm going to go Control X on them, because I don't like the way they're lying. And I would actually reattach these. And because I also have Machine Tools bump, that's a lot quicker than figuring out the other one. And again, get rid of these. Control X, and that just, to me, I just prefer that. Right, I'm going to QS, unmark them, because I want to bevel them manually, like that. There we go. And so it's the same thing again. QS to unmark them, bevel them. Look a bit like that. This one, Control B, like that. And actually I'll then do Control plus, then I'll select loops, boundary loop, do a Control B, and that way I can do my chamfer. 3, alt click, scale Y, I'm going to pull that in a bit. Then I'm actually going to inset these rather than extrude them. So I'll do inset, hold the control key straight away, and just pull in. And because I've held the control key and not moved the other way, that's as it should be. Except it isn't. I'm getting a hang on. I'm going to make there's something wrong there. What's going on here? That's better. I must have accidentally had the individual faces active. And again, I have this set to a hotkey because I use it so much. be. And again, it's the same thing, so you've got two completely separate ways of dealing with it. Like that, to both get a very similar result. So, as I say, there's when you sort of compare that to Josh's tutorial, you've got 3 ways, and there are probably at least as many ways again to approach this same issue. So don't always think when you're working with Blender that you're stuck to one method. Sort of look at it and try and figure out. Like with this, the first thing I looked at when I saw it was the actual outside shape. So in my mind it was just a plane that would be solidified. That's what struck me. But the minute you sort of say want to take this and you want some sort of shoulder here, then you get into trouble. But then again, less so with hard ops, because you can sort of get around it. But yeah, I mean, if you wanted a nice circle and then you wanted to cut that bit in, it would be more problematic. And then you need to know all of the other ways when the geometry trips you up. So that's it anyway. I think I've waffled on enough. I'll see you next time.